You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. You're listening to us on CBS radio station WJFK 1580 AM in the Washington, D.C. area, or on the web, WMClive.com, where you can find podcasts of previous shows too, and which can link you to iTunes, where you can also download and even subscribe to the show for automatic downloads worldwide. And you can find us, and you can like us too, on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter. The sun never sets on us. On today's show, we continue celebrating the recipients of the 2013 Women's Media Awards. The winner of the Social Media Award for Online Excellence is here, and to talk about the Multimedia Award winner, Makers, the Women Who Make America, Amy Richards divulges that project's next upcoming evolution. Then, the graduate student who has unearthed a Minnesota and Canadian cross-border scandal in sex trafficking, and a woman who triumphed after 15 months of abduction and abuse. But first, we have to go inside the headlines. There are 3 items this week inside the headlines, and all of them, shockingly, are good news. Now, I don't want to tarnish my reputation as a bright ray of darkness in a fake sunshine context, but, I'm going to recognize some decent news when I see it. So the first item is that the French Senate has approved a ban on pageants, beauty pageants for young girls. They're afraid of the hypersexualization of children, and the upper house of Parliament voted in September to end beauty pageants for children younger than 16. The measure now goes to the lower house, the National Assembly. Pageants are not as popular in France as they are here, but they're popular in small towns. France, of course, has no equivalent of the American reality shows like Toddlers and Tiaras and its hideous spin-off, Here Comes Honey Boo Boo. Still, the focus is on images of sexualized prepubescent girls. And the ban's champion, Chantal Jouanneau, who is a former junior minister for environment and a senator representing Paris for the center-right party, wrote a report on the hypersexualization of children, noting that it is extremely destructive for a girl between the ages of 6 and 12 to hear her mother say that what's important is for her to be beautiful, when we're fighting to say what counts is what they have in their brains. So I say good for the French Senate, and we hope that the lower house agrees. Then the second item is back here in the States. It's a new study, the latest from Boxed In, which is a report that tracks women's behind-the-scenes and on-screen representation in primetime television. So, women accounted for 28% of creators, executive producers, directors, writers, editors, and directors of photography working on primetime programs in 2012 to 2013. This represents an increase of 2 percentage points from 2011 to 2012 and a recent historical high. Now, well, you might say 2 percentage, but still 2 percentage point better than none. And on-screen, females comprised 43% of all speaking characters, and this figure is even with a historical high that was set in 2007-08. The study reports the findings of an expanded sample, including programs airing on basic and paid cable channels, as well as those available through Netflix. So that's good news, sort of, slow, incremental, but good news, don't you think? I'm trying to be very positive here. And then the third thing, it really does gladden my heart. Supporting candidates who identify as humanist, atheist, and agnostic. The Free Thought Equality Fund is a new political action committee, a PAC, that's dedicated to protecting the separation of church and state and to defending the civil liberties of secular Americans by providing non-theist Americans the opportunity to make our voices heard in the political process. You can find out more on the website, the freethoughtequalityfund.net. And it's going to be providing financial assistance to candidates who support secular government that will benefit all Americans, including those who value the absence of government entangle in their religious beliefs. It's affiliated with the Center for Humanist Activism, which itself is the advocacy arm of the American Humanist Association. freethoughtequalityfund.net, the first PAC of free thinkers. So that's the news inside the headlines. 3 good things, I think. Be a little happy. Our first guest is the winner of the 2013 WMC Social Media Award, as voted for by visitors to the Women's Media Center website. This one is truly a people's choice, and they choose out of an impressive list of bloggers. Lindy West is the choice. She's a humorist, cultural critic, body-positive activist, staff writer, and moral scold, she says, at Jezebel.com. She's also a frequent guest on NPR, has written for Slate, The Guardian, The Daily Telegraph, The New York Daily News, and MSNBC. You can visit her website, lindywest.net, or follow her on Twitter at @TheLindyWest. Welcome, Lindy, to Women's Media Center Live.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Well, congratulations. I have to start there because you are the 2013 winner of the Women's Media Center Social Media Award, which was presented on October 8th at the Gala in New York City. And I always think this award is really very special because it is the one that we do not choose at Women's Media Center. It's chosen by the people, by the public, writing in to vote on a very select list of really terrific social media writers and bloggers. And this year you are the winner. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Just being nominated with all those other women was the biggest honor that's ever happened to me, I think. And I honestly felt kind of guilty campaigning and asking people to vote for me because I don't know that I would have voted for me if I went and looked at that list because everyone was totally incredible. So I'm really, really humbled and flattered that this happened.
Well, you're a humorist, you're a cultural critic, you're a fat activist, you're a staff writer at Jezebel.com, but you've also written for Slate and The Guardian, and it's a combination of wit and feminism, which is absolutely unbeatable. So where do you plan to go from here?
That's a great question. I wish I had a plan. Well, Jezebel's my day job, so I'm there blogging every day, and I'm working on a book proposal, and I just want to keep sort of smuggling this social justice message into things that are entertaining for people to read. That's basically how I think about my job, is that I write things that people think are funny and they want to read, and secretly they're getting some medicine.
Yeah, well, I mean, humor goes under the radar in ways that, polemic and dreary words that end in TION and ISM don't.
Right, exactly.
And humor can be the most amazing quick recognition, click moment of insight. Oh, you too. I'm not alone. Oh, and the humor of recognition is just dynamite. I mean, it's one reason I think why authoritarian regimes are so bloody solemn and boring.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you've got a history of being wonderfully audacious. back when you were a film critic before you morphed into being a feminist commentator, and you made fun of Titanic, which I think is a sitting duck to make fun of. And then you also you created quite a blizzard on you in debating the issue of rape as a subject for male comics, and then of course the internet came down on your head. Tell about that.
Right. Well, so this has been a conversation in the comedy community for a long time about what's fair game and what isn't, and I decided to jump in, and I wrote a couple articles. The idea of which is not that anything is off limits, but that if you want to be a good person, you are sort of, it's a good idea to be gentle with other people's trauma, especially things like rape, which is ingrained in our culture in a lot of really subtle, invisible ways that men might not be aware of, as much as women are. And so basically I said, you can say whatever you want, but you're kind of a jerk if the butt of your joke is a rape victim and not the horrible absurdity of rape itself. Because people say, well, what about gallows humor? I need humor to deal with the horrors of my life, and that's fine. That's not what I'm talking about.
No,
I'm talking about the way that a lot of people who don't have firsthand experience with certain kinds of trauma can be really cavalier with it and wind up perpetuating attitudes that don't take that thing seriously. You know, if we lived in a culture where most rapists went to prison and where we didn't blame victims for their own rape, et cetera, I mean, we know all the issues. Then it would be one thing. It would be, I'm sure, not as damaging to make silly,
but the consciousness,
silly jokes about it.
The reality is not there yet. And interestingly enough, they never make jokes about the rapist. The rapist is not the butt of the joke, interestingly, Right. I mean, sometimes it is. There are some really great comics who do that. And I've called those comics out in my writing and said, here are some really great examples of how you can use this. Like, I don't even think that I don't think there should be no rape jokes. I think there should be more rape jokes that target rape culture and rapists and the way that we handle it. Exactly. Like you just said earlier, humor is such a powerful tool to dismantle these things. And I'm just against victimizing people and perpetuating rape culture. Yes. And when you had this debate, then of course immediately people began writing you on the internet and saying what you needed was a good rape. Right, exactly. Thus, so I said, proving the point. Guys, I think comedy has kind of a woman problem and a rape problem, and then I just got 1,000 emails about rape, threatening to rape me, or saying that I'm too ugly to be raped. But that was the main one, actually. Yeah. So thanks, guys. That's nice. Yeah. But it was really traumatic and horrible, but also it felt like a victory. I kind of felt like I tricked them into showing their hand. So it's really good, important work that you do, and that you do it with humor is all the more important. Right, exactly. And I just try to just keep hammering away at it all the time, because it gets really exhausting, and it starts to seem redundant to people. I can feel people getting bored with it in my Twitter feed, like, oh, I wish you would shut up, but I can't. I mean, it's just not anywhere close to being fixed, and we just kind of have to keep hammering at it and repeating the message over and over and over until it actually sticks. I doubt that they're getting bored, because I think you're very interesting. And we should say that your Twitter feed is at the Lindy West, not any old Lindy West, but the Lindy West. And your website is lindywest.net, right? Yep, exactly. So people can find you and continue to monitor your terrific activities. We'll look forward to the book. I hope you finish that proposal and get a contract and start writing it so you can come back on the show and talk about when the book is coming out.
Perfect. Thank you. Me too.
All right, Lindy, and congratulations again. It was wonderful meeting you, and it was wonderful that you won the 2013 Women's Media Center Social Media Award. Social media is the future of media, so the establishment of that award is a source of real pride to us at Women's Media Center.
Well, thank you so much. I'm deeply, deeply honored.
We need to take a break here. This is Women's Media Center Live, and I'm Robin Morgan. We'll be back in a moment to talk about Makers, the recipient of the 2013 first Women's Multimedia Award for groundbreaking contribution to women, history, and America.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome back. Our next guest is literally writing the book about Makers, thus taking this multimedia documentary and website archive into yet another medium. Amy Richards is well known already as an author, a co-founder of the Third Wave Foundation, the columnist Ask Amy on Feminist.com, and a host of other activist and literary ventures. Amy, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Robin.
Well, I want to start with talking about the Makers book, because, of course, Makers as a team just won the Women's Media Center Multimedia Award for Visionary Contribution to Women, History, and America, possibly the longest name of an award in history, from the Women's Media Center at the gala. And it also isn't an award just for what Makers has done, which has been historic, but what it is continuing to do and is about to do, and you're deeply involved in that. So tell us about the book.
Well, the things I've been working on mostly have been around the education of Makers and how it gets out into the world and goes viral. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest communities has been in the education field, and both educators in a formal sense, those teaching with affiliated institutions, but just parents and those affiliated with nonprofit groups that are working with kids and trying to fill in the history that they're getting or not getting. And saw right away that a book based on Makers was a necessary asset for this project. Also necessary because Makers thus far has been primarily a digital platform and a video platform, and it just seemed an empty gap there that we needed it. Even though we're moving to a digital age, we need to have printed matter as well to complement what we're doing.
It's so important. It's so important. And the educational aspect of it is crucial, because an entire generation now will grow up knowing this, and the repeated burying of successive women's movements down through history won't happen again. So this is thrilling. So you're writing the book.
Yes, Dylan McGee, the project's creator, and I are writing the book, and we're doing it for Viking and Penguin, and it will be marketed towards a sort of teen-tween audience, and it will be what Makers has been. It'll be a lot of first-person narrative, first-person stories, but I think a book, more than a video, will need to say in greater detail what exactly was Title IX, what exactly is sex discrimination under the law, rather than just sort of referencing or inferring these, going into greater detail about the sort of history and the advocacy and the legal sort of jurisprudence around some of these feminist and women's benchmarks. And so the book will have the same feel as the videos, but it'll have a little bit more augmented on the history side, the sort of elementary, how did we get from, 1960 to 2013, what have been the major benchmarks, and how can we use it as a premise to go forward.
And when is the book due out, Amy?
The book will be out hopefully by the fall of 2014, or at the most the spring of 2015.
Wow. Oh, well, we will look forward to that. You have to come back on the show around then, and so we can talk more about it as it is being born, okay?
Definitely.
Now, I want to take some time and also talk about Amy Richards. This is not her first book. There was the famous Manifesta. There's been a couple of others. And of course, you're still Ask Amy. You're our advice column voice on feminist.com. And in the multifaceted Renaissance womanness, you founded Soapbox, which is the feminist lecture bureau, and Feminist Camp. Tell the listeners something about these many Hindu goddess, many-armed activities.
Well, I'll start with the Feminist Camp, which began out of my own lecturing on college campuses. I would get to, a campus in rural Virginia or the middle of Wisconsin, and they would say, but what does feminism look like today? As much as there is a very vibrant and active women's studies community, a lot of what was available to students was very much the story up until now. Mm-hmm. Feminism in the past, and as mostly coming to them through books and through videos. Mm. And there was a lot of questioning of where was feminism today. And I felt that New York, as do many other cities, had many real-time examples. And so wanted to provide for students this exposure to what feminism meant today. And it didn't mean exclusively women's studies departments or the National Division for Women or Ms. Magazine, which tended to be their primary associations. It meant the Global Fund for Women. It meant GLSEN. It meant women working in religious institutions. It meant women and men working around philanthropy and human rights and working at the UN and working outside the UN. Mm-hmm. And so the idea was simple. Bring those interested to New York City for a week-long immersion into feminism. Each day is a different theme. Each session is different. And expose them individually. What ended up being, of course, an amazing additional benefit of this was twofold. One was the community that gets created throughout the week, and when those students go back to Wisconsin, they go back to California, and they go back to Michigan, they know that there were these 25 other people who just experienced this thing with them. Mm. And so when they're feeling lonely, when they're needing empowerment, they really tap into this sense of community that they got from that. It's their own, their girls' network and boys' network and trans network. They're a part of that.
They're alums of the same class.
Yes, and then they're tapping into a total alum group of now inching towards 200 that have gone through all of the camps. And campers have ranged in age from 15 to 55. They've been, all gender identity, all sexuality identified. Some mothers, some not mothers, some never want to be mothers. And it's been a great group. The other really added benefit has been a career path for a lot of people. When you're majoring in women's studies or majoring in liberal arts, you think, okay, well, if I don't get that one job working at Ms. Magazine, then where else can I work if I'm somebody who's interested in feminism? Right. And the camp really exposes it's not just the nonprofit sector and the for-profit sector. Within the nonprofit sector, there are so many jobs. Do you want communications? Do you want development? Do you want programming? Do you want to be social media? And then within the for-profit sector, there's many opportunities for feminism. And so it becomes this wonderful exposure to potential careers.
How great is this? This is terrific. And it grew out of Soapbox, and so explain Soapbox and the various other progeny that you've produced.
Yes, Soapbox is a straight-up lecture agency. It started by representing myself and my business partner, Jennifer Baumgartner, after we had written Manifesta, and it sort of publishing Manifesta coincided with the publishing world doing less and less for authors. And so we creatively did our own tour. We put it together. We said, you give us $1,000 and we'll make something magical happen. And we did. We started booking ourselves. And we really thought outside the box that as wonderful as it was to get a New York Times book review, what was going to sell more copies of Manifesta was getting onto one campus and having students go viral with it in their own communities. It was impressive that the New York Times, but it was necessary to have these accolades and these real vocal people talking about your book. And so Soapbox started by giving that same advice to other authors who were in similar positions to us, or other people who wanted a soapbox, as it were, a platform. And so we book speakers to go out on college campuses. We describe ourselves as the hub of feminism, and the camps are an extension of that. Ask Amy is this, unrelated aspect of that, but it is paralleling the work that I do at Soapbox, which is to interact with people around the topics of feminism. And I have always loved Ask Amy since I've been doing it now for nearly 20 years.
Oh, my God.
I know. Right after Al Gore created the internet, I created Ask Amy. But more and more my audiences say, who's Al Gore? So, and when was there a time without the internet? But created Ask Amy because there was just no forum for these unanswerable questions. I think that by the time you're reaching out to an organization, you have to have your premise, your thesis, your idea more fully formed. And a lot of what Ask Amy was doing was, what does it really mean to be trans? But what if I didn't, know that I was so vulnerable sexually? How do I get out of this? And it was, in some ways, I mean, some people might call them, silly questions, but I just think they're the questions we don't feel safe asking in another environment, and feminism provides that safety net. It provides the environment that says it's okay to ask anything. Well, and it's not your fault you don't know it. It's something intentional that's making you not know this.
Exactly. And clearly, even though Al Gore and inventing the internet is no longer at all au courant, you are, because younger people are coming to you, young yourself, and asking these questions, so they trust that voice. As do I and the rest of us. But unfortunately, we're out of time. Thanks so much, Amy, for being with us.
Thank you, Robin.
And it's time for another detour into the Surrealism Corner. Where we find another Saudi cleric. They're always such fun. You remember the one who said that women should not be allowed to come near bananas and cucumbers because they would give women unclean thoughts? They're a source of great comedy, these men. So this one is warning that women who drive cars can cause damage to our ovaries and pelvises, and we are at risk of having children born with, quote, clinical problems. This is Sheikh Saleh Al-Lohedin. His remarks have gone viral. He says, if a woman drives a car, it could have a negative physiological impact. Medical studies show that it would automatically affect a woman's ovaries because it pushes the pelvis upward. And he added, we find that for women who continuously drive cars, nonstop, 24/7, drive, their children are born with varying degrees of clinical problems. He was trying to offset the fact that Saudi women are literally gearing up for another driving demonstration on October 26th, about which more in a subsequent show. Here, you'll hear from us. But lest we point the finger at Saudi clerics, we must never forget our own Republican Ted Aiken and his infamous statements about rape and about how women's bodies have mysterious juices that shut down so we don't get pregnant. I mean, to these men, their ignorance about the female body, much less the female reality, is so profound that it's as if we were aliens who had just landed, waving our antenna. It is an astonishment. Of course, this news will hit particularly hard, the news about pushing your pelvis upward, hit Los Angelinos very, very hard, and other places where cars are the major means of transportation. On the other hand, if you add it to the environmental reasons against driving, it is another strong argument for mass transit. Time for another break here on Women's Media Center Live, where I persist in being Robin Morgan. Next up is a story hidden in plain sight for years that one courageous woman is daring to expose. Why Indigenous women have been vanishing in the harbor of Duluth, Minnesota.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
And we're back. The harbor of Duluth, Minnesota is infamous among First Nations people as a site where Native women from Minnesota and from Ontario, Canada, simply disappear. It's also notorious as a place where women are trafficked. Now, this open secret that no law enforcement agency has acted on has finally been exposed by a graduate student at the University of Minnesota Duluth who has been accumulating an avalanche of anecdotal reports of women, girls, and even babies being sold for sex. Here is that student who asked those questions, Christine Stark. Welcome, Chris, to the program.
Thank you.
You're a master's student at the University of Minnesota in Duluth, and you had worked with the work that you're doing, the current research, is an offshoot of an older report on prostitution in Minnesota in conjunction with the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition. But none of us who have paid attention to this have ever heard of the story that you came up with, which is that sexual slavery is going on ships in the port of Duluth. By the way, this would be the Ojibwe Nation?
Yes, the Ojibwe or Anishinaabe. There's also some Dakota women as well.
On both sides of the border, both Canada and right.
It's primarily Anishinaabe, Ojibwe women.
Okay, just tell us what you've been discovering.
Yeah, and so this came out of the Garden of Truth, the Prostitution and Trafficking of Native Women, which was conducted by MUSAC and Prostitution Research and Education. And what happened is that one of the reasons why we did the report, Garden of Truth, in 2011 was because there were so many stories that Native women in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and even in some of the reservations in North Dakota had been hearing and telling about Native women and children being sold for sex, prostituted and trafficked in the Duluth Harbor on the ships. And so we created this report out of that and came up with some, really stunning numbers, devastating numbers for Native women and the colonization and the vulnerability that we experience due to that colonization. And what I then did just this past spring was we were starting to hear some kind of rumblings in the Duluth area about how, the ships, it never really happened out there. And so I said, this needs to be documented. Mm-hmm. And as part of my program at the University of Minnesota Duluth, I did this, small exploratory project just as a beginning attempt to gather information about the prostitution of Native women and children. And also, I have been told of reports of babies being brought out onto the ships. And essentially what it is it's, a trafficking hub. I've now heard about First Nation women being brought from Winnipeg over into Thunder Bay and then down into the Duluth area. I've interviewed a woman who talks about her own experiences and other First Nation women's and children's experiences of being brought from Thunder Bay down into Duluth. And then the Duluth women, talk about being taken up to Thunder Bay, to other ports around the country, around the U.S., and then also to other countries as well.
This is so horrific, doubly, triply, because there's at least on land, if the rare chance occurs, you can run.
Right.
But on a ship, there's nowhere to go. How does it work? These are tankers and trading ships, right? Cargo ships.
Correct, and it's an international port, and so they're coming into the Duluth Harbor, and as you said, there's nowhere to go. So imagine the vulnerability that these women are experiencing, and a common refrain is talk about them throwing women and children overboard.
Oh my God!
That's something that we've heard from a number of different Native people, men and women. And also there are many stories of Native people who know that a woman went out onto those ships and they've never been seen
and never came back.
So decades later, no one knows where they are.
Tell me, Chris, what's their MO? I mean, is it mostly abductions? Do they lure the women on the ships for a quote good time and party? Are the women being paid and doing maybe at least the initial evening, so they think, out of poverty need? How does it work, or is it all of the above?
It is all of the above. I would categorize it as two basic, maybe tracks, you might say.
Yeah.
And one would be that a lot of the women, say, come on, let's go out and party on the boats. So that's kind of has been the common language. Let's go party on the boat. And then the men, get them drunk, or give them drugs. They give them money, and so on. And so the survival sex is happening there. But then there is also a very organized aspect to it as well, in which, you have pimps out on the ships, and you have pimps on the shore in Duluth and Superior, and they're coordinating, with the men on the boats. And so the prostitution has happened out on the boats, and it also has happened significantly in the Duluth and Superior area, in the motels and in the bars as well. And a 10-second Google search will bring up some information about, it's called Canal Park, is the area in Duluth there, the port area, as being a red light district back in the 1880s, and just a major site of prostitution for decades now.
So it has been going on for generations.
Yeah.
And when they download the women into other ports, are they selling the women then to pimps, to brothels, to, do we know, how do we know, I guess?
Yeah, I women have talked about, other women and kids being sold globally on these ships, so being brought to other countries and sold, as one woman put it to me, to the big guns. And then there are also reports of some of the women being brought, maybe they end up in New Orleans, and what is often happens is that they were taken off the ship, booted off the ship, and now they're in New Orleans, and they have to find their way back.
Wow. Has anyone found her way back? Do we have
some of the women have gone through that experience and come back. And then, as I said, there are many stories of Native women who have just simply gone out on the boats and disappeared.
And vanished, yeah.
No one has ever heard from
them. And the children, the use of children to this large an extent is interesting, horrifying. So we know that this is sexual slavery as much or more than labor slavery. Yeah,
absolutely. It's very common from the folks I have talked with for underage girls primarily,
sure.
But also there have been boys who have been taken out onto the ships as well.
What can we do about this? The listeners to this program are very activist. Is there a website that they can learn about so they can stay abreast of your research on this, or find out if there's anything that they can do?
Absolutely. You can go to www.miwsac.org, and you can download for free The Garden of Truth, The Prostitution and Trafficking of Native Women in Minnesota. I also have links to some of this information, and I will be releasing the report focused on the ships on my own website, which is christinestark.com. And then the Garden of Truth is also on www.pre.edu. And so that would be a great way for folks to, educate themselves about the information that we have gathered over the past few years. One of the things that I want to put out there is that Native women in prostitution and trafficking have virtually no services whatsoever. And they really want and need culturally specific services so that they can get out, so that they can heal from this, so that they can have a place where they're understood. One of the women that I interviewed up in Duluth is in her mid-50s, and she was prostituted, on the ships and in other places as well. And she's living in a halfway house, and she was begging me, please just get us a table and get us some pamphlets so we can all get together and meet. The women need services. They need concrete, changes, so that they can do what they want with their lives.
Say again, your website, which is the easiest one to remember, and as long as you have links to the others, I'm going to say that one again, is simply Christine Stark. That's Christine with an H, C-H, ChristineStark.com.
Absolutely.
Oh, Christine, thank you so much for this work. And please stay in touch as the research develops, because this is a story we don't want to have lapse.
Yes, thank you very much.
We have to take one more quick break. I'll be back with a woman who survived an infamous abduction and months of every kind of severe abuse, but not merely survived. She's turning the nightmare into good for other women.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome back again. Amanda Lindhout is a Canadian journalist who was kidnapped by Islamists in southern Somalia in 2008. She was held prisoner and abused in horrific ways for 15 months. She lived, however, not only to tell the tale, but to transcend it. Welcome to the program, Amanda. It's good to have you here.
Thank you, Robin.
Let's start by talking about the book, A House in the Sky, which is the memoir recounting the experience in which you were kidnapped and held. It was for 15 months as a hostage. I think it's just amazing that you didn't opt to spend the rest of your life curled in a fetal position. But clearly you are moving on and turning this atrocious experience into remarkably something positive. So talk about the book, and then I want to get on to the foundation you started and the work you're doing for women and girls and consciousness.
House in the Sky is the story of my life. It is the story of a young woman who is me in search of herself and in search of herself in relation to the world. So it's the story of me growing up in a poor household in central Alberta, Canada, and the wanderlust that was born during my childhood from looking at the images on National Geographic magazine pages, and then which ultimately led me out into the world to discover myself as people do in their 20s. And it was my love of travel and of the world that led me into journalism. I've always loved telling stories and reading stories, and it felt like telling other people's stories might be the answer to a question that I had as a young woman about how I could make a difference in the world. Mm-hmm. And it was this freelance journalism that led me in 2008 as a 26-year-old woman into Somalia to tell a story that major media corporations had long since stopped covering because it's very dangerous to send correspondents there, creating opportunities for freelancers like myself.
Right.
And on the third day in the country, though, a worst-case situation unfolded, and an Australian colleague and I were abducted by a group of young men, most of them teenagers, and held hostage in often brutal conditions, which deteriorated over the course of time. And A House in the Sky is a story of the personal transformation that occurred for me in the midst of almost unimaginable hardships. And it's a story, though really dark and sometimes brutal, is also a story of survival, and it's a story of hope. And it has been very important to me as a survivor of many things, a survivor of rape, a survivor of torture, a survivor of gender-based violence, to share my story with others. And here we are, A House in the Sky came out this month, and it's this really interesting time for me now to have that story out in the world and to have other people commenting on and interpreting my story. It's an interesting time.
Well, it's a incredibly gripping story and a very courageous one, I must say. And it's not just about survival, which itself is quite a feat considering what you've been through, but it's about, the word that comes to mind is transformation, because you took this experience and you've turned it into something strange and positive and wonderful, to work on gender-based violence, to found it's the Global Enrichment Foundation, and it's creating opportunities in Somalia by offering university scholarships to women. I mean, Somalia clearly is still a wretchedly tortured, miserable country. We're talking in the middle of news headlines about the attack in Kenya by Somalis, but that one woman has done this and done it so affirmatively is quite extraordinary. I mean, how have you managed this?
During those 15 and a half months that I was a hostage, I had an up-close and personal look at what over 2 decades of war has done to destroy the country of Somalia, and the effects that this culture of war is having on the young people, for example, my teenage captors. And so with that understanding of war and of violence and of oppression after the experience I had in captivity, with that awareness comes responsibility. And that was clear to me. And the idea that if I were to have a second chance at life, I'd be able to actually work towards supporting positive change in Somalia, that helped me on a day-to-day basis. And when I came out, I was clear that that is what I've wanted to do. And I've had the great privilege of working alongside the Somali community over the last 4 years with the Global Enrichment Foundation. And I think events like what has been unfolding in Nairobi are really unfortunate, because it's yet another thing that makes people look at people with suspicion when most Somalis have fled al-Shabaab.
Of course.
So to the efforts to relocate to second and third countries, and witnessing this bloodbath in Nairobi right now, I just think it's so unfortunate that it will negatively impact the public image of the Somali people living around the world, who really are in need of and deserve our compassion. Of
course. Well, but what is also remarkable is that you opted to continue working with the Somali people. You seem to be able to rise above negativity in an extraordinarily resilient way. I know, for example, that there are some media pundits who have attacked you moronically. Well, why did she go to such a place? I might add that they wouldn't have asked that about if you were a young man seeking adventure and seeking to make a difference. They would not have wondered why you were there. But it's the blame the victim all over again. And it is really, every time I've seen those comments, which are not the majority of comments, fortunately, but every time I see them aimed at you, it makes me crazy.
Yeah, that's been unfortunate that someone like myself, who has survived many different kinds of violence, faces this particular kind of violence in the media. I have always been very careful about what I wanted to share about what happened to me, for this very reason, that there is a media fixation on sexual violence. And when I am described in summary as a woman, a nameless woman who was sexually brutalized and gang raped, in headline summary, that diminishes me as a person, and it re-victimizes me.
Absolutely.
And I'm certainly not the only woman who's experiencing this, as we see how sexual violence is reported in the media.
Precisely. Yeah. No, it reactivates and recommits the crime. What do you plan in the future before I let you go?
The future is a big question mark, but a question mark that I'm really excited about heading towards. There's so many opportunities right now. I think about furthering my education. I think about the opportunities we have to expand and grow the Global Enrichment Foundation and our programs, which have reached over 200,000 people in the last 4 years. And I think about growing our work, and that makes me feel really excited. I know that my life on this side, as I'm going through recovery, is going to be whatever I make it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're making it something really special. The website is globalenrichmentfoundation.com. Just that simply, globalenrichmentfoundation.com. If anyone wants to get in touch or learn more about their work or contribute, I presume that would be not unwelcome. And I wish you well on this journey, because I think you so deserve it, and I think that you'll make it, and whatever direction you go in, it will be something quite wonderful, because you've earned it, and you're a strong and terrific, beautiful woman. So thank you for being all that, and thank you for the book, which is called A House in the Sky and is newly published and should be got and read by everybody. And thank you for being with us on Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you, Robin.
Now for some fighting words. When I was brooding over the House Republicans' intransigence and their leader, John Boehner's, being a sycophantic troglodyte who wouldn't stand up to the worst of them, and how their position, they claimed, of not talking, of not budging, of not considering anyone else's view except their own, was not just intransigence, but anti-cooperation. And in fact, I thought, it's unnatural. A word that they've often used against feminists, against gay and lesbian people, so it's nice to turn it around. I thought that because I was remembering the work of Harvard psychologist Daniel Wegner, who first began exploring the notion of collective rather than individual knowledge, in the 1980s, by observing how partners in long-term relationships can very frequently divide and conquer memory tasks. He suspected this division of labor takes place because we have fairly good, what he called meta-memory. We are aware of our mental strengths, in other words, and our limits, and we're good at intuiting the ability of others. So if you hang around a colleague or a romantic partner long enough, and you begin to realize that while you're bad at remembering your own schedule, or I don't know how big a kilometer is relative to a mile, you notice that they're great at it. So you begin to subconsciously delegate the task of remembering that stuff to them. You're sort of treating them like a notepad or an encyclopedia, or like Google for that matter. And in many respects, Wegner noted, people are superior to these devices because what we lose in accuracy we make up for in speed. And he called this phenomenon transactive memory. Two heads are better than one. We share the work of remembering because it makes us collectively smarter. And I put that together in my brooding with the altruistic gene. You remember that book that came out a few years ago, that we're programmed not just for brutality, but for altruism. And together with the finding of some years ago about oxytocin and how it's released as a neurotransmitter when you do something nice for somebody. It also is released as the bonding neurotransmitter between a newborn and its mother. And the more men father, the more oxytocin is released in them as well. So I began to think, maybe we're hardwired for good stuff too. And that, of course, led me in turn to believe maybe the House Republicans are unnatural. That's it for this week. You've been listening to us on CBS station WJFK 1580 AM radio and on the web at WMClive.com, which also has podcasts of previous shows. Or maybe you've been downloading us on iTunes, where you can also subscribe for automatic downloads worldwide. And we want to hear from you. Write us, and you might like us while you're at it, on Facebook. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and for this program Executive Producer Julie Burton, Senior Producer Crystal Williams-Chancellor, and our founding sponsor Regina Kulik-Scully. I'm still Robin Morgan. Thanks for being with us. Join us next week when we examine in depth the far too often overlooked importance of editing in news, magazines, books, and film, inspired by the Women's Media Center new Art of Editing Award, which we've established in memory of Mary Tom, our late web features editor. Be with us then and follow us on Twitter for news of guests and other upcoming shows, only here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio and WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.